Hi, my name's Andy Bourne, and my case study research presentation, I'm going to use my recent experience of making documentary film, Sticks and Stones, and examples of documentaries to be the basis of my case study, documentary filmmaking ethics, responsibility and its role as an agent of social change, and can documentary film change the world for the better, or is there a risk of harm? In making the film Sticks and Stones, a 30-minute documentary about the harms of drug and alcohol stigma, we've set out to document individual stories as to their effects and its effects on people. As we are passionate about the subject and mindful of our own biases, we wanted to ensure the production was relevant, meaningful and ethical, and use several research practices to enhance the available research already available online. The design of the study aims to show that representations within society and indeed films have contributed to the harms created by stigma and also other subjects, but also that documentary film can be a real agent for change. This will be shown through a series of articles and examples relating to documentary filmmaking ethics, alongside both the good and not so good examples of documentary film. As it was important for us to making Sticks and Stones to be as ethically involved and as accurate as we could be, this research looks into the challenges and expectations faced by documentary filmmakers and the conflicts that they can throw up. I will then conclude my findings and project how I would like to disseminate the information in the future. Ethical and other considerations. In making a film which aims to challenge behaviour, tells real life and often difficult stories on sensitive subject matters, ensuring that we are ethically honest and supportive was the first consideration of our film Sticks and Stones. Documentary ethics guides filmmakers in their truthfully portraying events, respecting their subjects and considering their film's impact. These key principles include truth and accuracy, fair representation without manipulation, informed consent, privacy and avoiding harm. As filmmakers, we must also be accountable, culturally sensitive and socially responsible. While ethical guidelines may vary, the core lies in balancing storytelling with responsibility. Documentaries truly influence our worldview, so if we mislead an audience for entertainment's sake, we will massively erode trust and undermine the film and filmmakers' credibility. And importantly, and something we really had to consider when we were making our own film, Sticks and Stones, our duty and care to the documentary subjects and the wider communities of which they represent. Misrepresentation can damage a filmmaker's integrity and can spread harmful misinformation. And in a world where misinformation, or fake news, alternative facts, and the speedy spread of information and misinformation through social media, it's never been more important. For our film, and for documentaries especially challenging subject matter which, like stigma, is often a subject of misinformation, ignorance and untruth, the importance of verifying and providing facts is a key consideration. To ensure facts are checked and credible, it is imperative that we take the data from a number of varied sources, which can be interviews with those who have lived experience of stigma, those who work challenging it, scholarly, medical and professional journals, writings and works on the subject. Documentary ethics guide filmmakers in truthfully portraying events, respecting their subjects and considering their film's impact. These key principles include truth and accuracy, fair representation without manipulation, informed consent, privacy and avoiding harm. As filmmakers, we must also be accountable, culturally sensitive and socially responsible, while ethical guidelines may vary. The core lies in balancing storytelling with responsibility. Documentaries truly influence our worldview, so if we mislead an audience for entertainment's sake, we will massively erode trust and undermine the film's and filmmakers' credibility. And importantly, and something we really had to consider when we were making our own film Sticks and Stones, our duty of care to the documentary subjects and the wider communities that they represent. Our bias needs to be something we're aware of throughout the filmmaking process. Bias favours one perspective without considering others. It becomes problematic in storytelling when we're unaware of it or we choose to ignore it, as it can cloud our judgment. Documentaries on controversial topics, it's crucial to go beyond our biases and seek diverse information to get closer to the truth. We also need to protect those who are representing or telling their stories, and it comes with huge responsibility to protect those participants from harm. This was especially important when working with people who've suffered multiple traumas and, whether complicit or with confirmed consent or not, they need to be protected. And consent itself not only needs to be confirmed, it needs to be understood, properly communicated as to the risk versus rewards of laying out your story and opening yourself up to the challenges we face through personal disclosure. And that also, where possible, the film's subjects feel they are here for the whole journey and that they can be consulted along the way to give feedback on how everything is moving along and can offer continued involvement and collaboration. And to remember that consent can be withdrawn at any time. In the film Subject, directed by Jennifer Teixeira and Camila Hall, explores the life-altering experience of sharing one's life in screen through key participants' acclaimed documentaries. Viggo Juarez talks about when describing the challenges within documentary filmmaking community, in a way, self-regulate and maintain a set of ethical protocols as standard, an almost unwritten rule of law as described by him. Nowadays, the conversations around cinema, especially documentary cinema, are completely dominated by a tyranny of the process. Attending some festivals in Latin America and Europe over the past 10 years, I started to notice that the first question that arises in any Q&A with a filmmaker, especially a documentary filmmaker, is always about the process. That there is an imaginary checklist ready to be materialised in every conversation with a filmmaker, where your participants, fully aware of the film you were doing, did they have the chance to influence the editing process, and were they happy with the results? That's from the missing link in documentary ethics. Although I feel that this is an important aspect of the work I do with people, and especially more so when working with people's trauma, potential PTSD, lapse and relapse, others amongst the documentary filmmaking community felt outside of what Victor Guimaraes calls an imaginary checklist, ready to be materialised in every conversation with a filmmaker. For example, the filmmaker Victoria Linares, when asked a similar question about the film It Runs in the Family, answered against the norm, stating, "I wanted to escape my family, so the contract was not with what you would expect. They were okay with taking part in the film, but they didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I don't think I owe them that." And I think, in many circumstances, there has to be a belief that each project and subject needs to be considered differently at time. And as this project was very personal to her, I can understand her need to control its narrative more. I feel, though, that there doesn't need to be a standardised checklist as things become too safe and robotic. And these ethical considerations around, especially the truth and 100% protected has to influence how the project is carried out. Therefore, having a well-being trigger and content warning support element included is a major ethical consideration action, especially in our film Sticks and Stones. A content warning is a verbal or written notice that precedes potentially sensitive content. These notices flag up the contents of the material that follows, so readers, listeners or viewers can prepare themselves to adequately engage, or if necessary, disengage for their own well-being. We ensured that the areas of the documentary film had correct examples of trigger warnings. Trigger warnings. These are a specific variety of content warnings that attempt to forewarn audiences of content that may cause intense psychological and physiological symptoms for people with PTSD and other anxiety disorders. Through the lens and who is telling the story. The storyteller in the context is the filmmaker. However, this role can be complex as it involves not just the individual director, but also the production team, editors and others involved in shaping the narrative. The storyteller's identity, background, experiences and perspectives all influence the way in which the story is told. The lens through which they understand and shape the story. The lens refers to the perspective, biases and worldview of the filmmaker. This lens is shaped by the filmmaker's personal history, cultural background and the social and political context in which they operate. When the filmmaker is an outsider to the community whose story they are telling, their understanding and interpretation may differ significantly from an insider. The lens also involves the ethical framework through which the filmmaker approaches a story, including their awareness of power dynamics, potential harm, and the responsibility to the community being portrayed. Accountability to the community. The filmmaker must consider their relationship to the community, whose story they are telling. This involves recognising the power dynamics at play, understanding the potential for harm, and taking steps to ensure that the filmmaking process is respectful and equitable. Accountability also means ensuring that the community benefits from the telling of their story. This could involve collaborative storytelling, where the community has a say in how their story is portrayed, or it could involve measures to ensure that the story does not reinforce harmful stereotypes or narratives. Power dynamics and potential harm. Filmmakers must be aware of the power they hold in shaping the narrative and how this power can affect the community. The process of making a film, as well as the content of the film itself, can have real-world consequences for the people being depicted. The release of the film might have unintended consequences, such as exposing vulnerabilities or reinforcing stigmas which could harm the community. And this was something we really had to take into account with our own film. The process of film, its community and impact. The process should involve multiple circles of participants, include the filmmaker, the people on the screen and the broader community that may be impacted by the film. Key consideration is how the filmmaking process and the final film will affect the community. The filmmaker has a responsibility to ensure that telling someone's story leaves them better off, or at least does no harm. This involves considering how the community's agency and dignity are maintained throughout the storytelling process and ensuring that their voices are authentically represented. In today's filmmaking landscape, particularly when telling stories about communities different from the filmmaker's own, there's a growing recognition that ethical responsibility is paramount. This includes being mindful of the power dynamics at play, engaging with the community in a respectful and collaborative manner, and considering the potential impacts of both the filmmaking process and the final product on the community. The storyteller, the filmmaker, must navigate these complexities with care, ensuring that their lens does not obscure or distort the reality of the people whose communities they are telling, and that the community's well-being is prioritised through the process. The power to change and challenge. Documentaries often have a profound and observable impact on society, influencing behaviours and catalysing social change. Unlike narrative films, whose influences are more uncertain and difficult to measure, documentaries frequently collaborate with activists and organisations that focus on the issues that they present, further amplifying their impact. For example, Citizen4 is a real-life thriller unfolding by the minute, giving audiences unprecedented access to filmmaker Laura Poitras and journalist Glenn Greenwald's encounters with Edward Snowden. And also An Inconvenient Truth, which is a 2006 documentary film directed by Davis Guggenheim, featuring former US Vice President Al Gore. The film aims to educate the public about the dangers of global warming. One prominent example is the documentary Blackfish, which critically examines SeaWorld's history and its exploitation of marine mammals, particularly orcas, for entertainment purposes. The film exposes the harsh realities behind the scenes, revealing what SeaWorld attempts to conceal from the public and ultimately leads viewers to question the ethics of SeaWorld's treatment of these animals. The impact of Blackfish was significant and tangible following its release. SeaWorld experienced a sharp decline in attendance and a notable drop in stock prices. In response to a public outcry and in an effort to rehabilitate its image, SeaWorld announced a major policy shift, declaring that the current generation of orcas in captivity would be the last, effectively ending their controversial orca breeding program. This case illustrates a unique power of documentaries to not only inform but to also incite real-world changes by shining a spotlight on critical issues and prompting public action. In our film, Sticks and Stones, we knew the focus was that we wanted to highlight and educate, but we knew that credibility was essential along with facts, as it was challenging behaviours. We knew that the audience would be easy to identify in making the piece, but we were looking at challenging a different audience. So therefore we needed to be challenging and potentially upset those whose behaviour we were looking to change. But we did not want to put them off, as that would defeat the aim of the film completely. We were clear that we came into the project with a bias, and that it is important that we engage the wider community, people outside the community, to be involved. by holding focus groups with the community, inviting people to be part of the discussion. And the only way to challenge fake news is with the real facts and present them clearly and without bias. The opportunity for the affected to share their stories is powerful, but we have a duty of care to protect also. And that research is balanced, interviews with wider community, questionnaires through social media and diverse community groups, focus groups, educational and academic papers online around the subject. Speaking with professionals were some of the things that we used in respect of our own research. Sticks and stones, we used over 100 hours of interviews with the wider community. We also looked at extending questionnaires through social media. We aimed at the audience to be very different and to get as wide a view as possible and as diverse a response as we could possibly get. We held meetings with the community, forums and focus groups. We worked with psychology and other services to draw accurate data and information from the research. We also widened the research by accessing articles on stigma from around the world. Documentary filmmaking requires acknowledgement and application of industry ethics such as integrity of content and respectful, non-exploitative filmmaking relationships. Audiences are typically unconcerned about filmmaking ethics, particularly in reference to science and educational films. It is, however, under this categorical umbrella that some of the most serious ethical grievances have taken place. For example, in 2013, Discovery Channel programme titled Megalodon, The Monster Shark Lives became a highly controversial episode during the network's annual Shark Week event. Although it drew in a fantastically large 4.8 million views, it did so under misleading pretences. The programme itself called itself a documentary featuring interviews with scientists, archival footage and scientific evidence. This was far from the truth, and what this approach led to was significant backlash from the scientific community and viewers alike, who felt that Discovery betrayed its educational mission in favour of sensationalism. In conclusion, documentaries hold a unique position as both educational tools and sources of entertainment, offering the potential to inform, inspire and drive change. However, when the pursuit of ratings and financial gain takes precedence, the integrity of these documentaries can be compromised, leading to a blurring or even loss of the intended message. Are we advocates or entertainers? Passive observers versus activists? The integrity of a documentary is essential to its impact and credibility. When the pursuit of ratings leads to sensationalism, misinformation or deception, the trust between the filmmaker and the audience is eroded. This not only diminishes the educational value of the documentary, but also undermines its potential to contribute meaningfully to public discourse. To combat these issues, several steps can be taken by both filmmakers and also consumers. Ethical standards and accountability. Filmmakers and broadcasters should adhere to ethical standards and prioritise the accuracy, transparency and fairness. Education, media literacy. Audiences must be equipped with the tools to critically assess the content that they consume. Media literacy programs can help viewers distinguish between fact and fiction, recognise bias and understand the motivations behind the documentaries they watch, and this is especially important in a time of fake news. Diverse voices and perspectives, including a range of voices and perspectives, can help ensure a more balanced and accurate portrayal of subjects. This can also help prevent the oversimplification or sensationalism of complex issues. Active engagement and dialogue. Filmmakers should engage with their audiences beyond the screen, encouraging discussions, providing resources for further learning, and supporting initiatives relating to the documentary subject matter. The balance between education and entertainment is delicate but crucial. Documentaries have the power to shape perceptions, influence public opinion and also drive change by maintaining integrity, being transparent and with our audience fostering critical engagement. Both filmmakers and consumers can help ensure that documentaries remain powerful and reputable sources of information. Ultimately, the goal should be to inform and inspire action, not just to entertain, so that documentaries continue to serve as a potent catalyst for awareness and change. Dissemination. We're looking to release our documentary and further promote anti-stigma campaign, but also ethical processes in filmmaking. We're going to share our findings and points of interest as a follow-up on the film. We're going to utilise our findings in research in future work. We're going to reflect on all the findings and show we introduce any findings which support improvements in any future project. We'd like to share information and findings through social media and campaign projects to support the work that we've done, and use any findings in the construction of future questionnaires, interviews or other research. Thank you. My name's been Andy, and thank you for listening to my presentation.